we're starting, so, well.
I can't think of anything.
Okay. All right. We're talking today with Mr. Anthony Urbon of Grand Rapids, Michigan. The interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Now, Mr. Urbon, can you start by telling us a little bit about your background? To start with, where were you born?
I was born in Grand Rapids.
And in what year? 1917?
17 years.
Right, okay. And what did your family do for a living then?
My dad was a barber. He kind of talked me into it. He says, "What do you want to do? Do you want to go work in a factory?" And I seen some of the kids that worked in a factory, and they were coming home and they were really dirty. And I says, if I can help it, I don't want to work in a factory. So I went to barber school.
Okay. Now, did you finish high school first?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I quit in my senior year. I was not too crazy about going to school.
Could you go to barber school in Grand Rapids?
No, I went to barber school in Detroit.
And do you remember how long it took to complete barber school?
I'm just trying to think. You had to put in so many hours, but I went full time, and I had my time in within, I think it was 4 months. You had to have so many days and so many hours, but I went there full time. I didn't go part time. So when I finished that, then I had to work under a licensed barber for 2 years. I could not run a barber shop by myself. The longest that I could be would be 2 hours. If a licensed barber wanted to go for lunch or something, I could take over, but I could not take over for a whole week or a month, but
Right.
because I had to put in a certain amount of hours
Right. Now,
as an apprentice.
okay. Now, did you do that work in Detroit, or could you go back to Grand Rapids for that? Do you remember where you were an apprentice?
In Grand Rapids. I could, if a person was going to take a vacation, but I could not run the barber shop on my own. You had to have a licensed barber
Right.
there.
Okay. Now did you complete your apprenticeship?
Yes.
Okay. And then did you open your own shop, or did you work for your father, or what did you do?
If somebody went on vacation, I could go to the barber shop there, and I could only do that if there was a licensed barber there.
Right. But after that, after the time when you were an apprentice, when you finished the apprenticeship, then you got to be a licensed barber
Yes.
yourself, right? And then, who did you work for then?
Different barber shops.
Okay.
If somebody, if they had to go to the hospital or so, but I had to have a licensed
Right,
barber
right,
there
right.
before I could work by myself.
Okay. Now, when we get down to 1940, in 1940, the National Guard unit from Grand Rapids was mobilized. Now, did you have friends who were in the National
Yes.
Guard?
And they tried to talk me into it. I said, And then when I got drafted, I was sent down to where the National Guards were, down to
In Louisiana?
Louisiana, but I was trying to think of,
That'd be Camp Livingston, Louisiana. Livingston?
yeah, I went to Livingston,
Right.
but the National Guards were at Border Guard. I did not go to Border
Right.
Guard.
Because they moved in February of 41, something like that. They moved to Livingston, and then you were drafted in April of 41.
Yes.
Right. Now, what was your reaction when you got the draft notice in the mail? Do you remember that?
I asked to be sent up to Alaska, and they sent me down to Louisiana where the National Guards were
Right.
at.
Okay, so what kind of welcome did you get in Louisiana when you got there?
Well, the fellow just says, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Hey, my neighbors sent me here,
Right.
not my friends."
All right. Now, what kind of assignment did you get when you joined the Army? What job did you get? Or what unit were you with?
I was with a band because I played an instrument when I was a kid, say, going to high school. And yeah, I went to the director there and I asked if I could join the band.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, "Well, can you play an instrument?" I said, "Yes." So then I was just attached to the band because the band only had so many players where that could be there. And I was with a line company,
Right.
but I spent my time with the band.
Okay. Now, what?
And why did you want to get into the band though? What were they having you do prior to that you didn't want to do? Remember we talked about the guns and stuff?
Yeah. Why did you want to be in the band?
So I wouldn't have to go up to the front.
Okay.
But what gun did they want you
Uh,
to learn how to shoot?
a Browning automatic.
Okay. That's a pretty big gun.
Oh, you better believe it.
Right. Now, did you have to do a lot of the regular basic training, the marching and the
Yes.
drilling and when? Yeah. What do you remember about that?
There was one time that we were like on maneuvers, and we were there for, I think it was 3 months. So I think I even had to go on a rifle range to learn how to use a Browning automatic rifle.
All right. Now, when you joined the band, what instrument did you play?
I played a trumpet, and then when I was in high school, I played a sousaphone, and there was only one other fellow there that played it, and they would let you go home for so long, then you'd have to go back. So there was times when I was the only sousaphone player in the band.
Okay. So they didn't need a trumpeter?
No, they had enough trumpet players.
Okay, but you could play the tuba, so you got to play that.
Yes.
All right. Now, while you were down there in Louisiana, did you get to go off the base? Could you go to town or go to New Orleans or anything
Once
like
in
that?
a while, yes.
Okay.
But then, when war broke out, they said to us, you can go into town, but if Japan decided to bomb or land in the States, they says, get back to camp the best way you could.
Right.
Even get a cab. You don't have to pay for the cab.
Right.
Hey,
Now, when Pearl Harbor happened, were you on the base that day?
no, the division had a football team, and we were playing in some town.
Okay.
But then, when Pearl Harbor got bombed, I wasn't at camp. I was on my way home because we went to town to play at the football
Right.
game.
Right. So they brought the band along with the football game.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Okay. So you found out about that, and then now did they stop the football game, or did you finish the game and then go home?
Finished the game.
Okay. All right. Now, after Pearl Harbor, then, did you have any different assignments? Did things in the camp change after the war started?
They sent us down to Lake Pontchartrain. And they said if you're in town and if Japan starts to bomb the United States, get back to camp the best way you can.
Now, what were you doing at Lake Pontchartrain? Were you guarding something, or?
No, we were just stationed there for a
Okay.
while.
Yeah. Just to watch out to see what would happen.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Now, eventually, after a couple more months, the division is ready to move. And when you left Louisiana, where did you go first?
To Boston.
Okay.
And I thought that we were going to go to Europe. They put us on a train. We went all the way across the states to Frisco.
Mm-hmm.
And from Frisco over to, just trying to think now, where did they put us?
You went to Adelaide, Australia, didn't you?
Yeah, that's what,
But when you were in San Francisco, did you stay in San Francisco for a while?
just a little while, because I thought we were going to be sent to Europe.
Right. Yeah. Well, they thought that too, and then they
Yeah.
changed their mind.
Yes.
Okay. So, and they had you, and did you stay at the Cow Palace in San
Yes.
Francisco? Okay. All right. And then, do you remember the ship that you went on out of San Francisco? Or what kind of ship it was?
I think the ship was the Lordline. And they had 3 or 4 bunks in the regular
The rooms?
rooms.
Yeah. Okay. So you were in a room with four men, or
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And now, how had you ever been on a big boat before?
No,
Okay. And what was that like? Did you get sick, or did the guys
No.
around you get sick?
no. I thought I was going to get seasick, but I never got seasick. The waves were pretty high, but I managed not to get seasick.
Okay. Now, when you were sailing, I think the water was bad right near San Francisco. Once you got out on the ocean, it wasn't so bad.
No, it wasn't so
Yeah.
bad.
Now, did you do anything special when you crossed the date line or the equator? Did they have a ceremony of some kind?
Yeah, what did they call it? Because when you cross the date line, they gave you like a little card, but I forgot what the card was for because we crossed the date line.
Now, there was also something in your papers, or something about how you shaved somebody's head
Oh yeah.
when you were crossing the equator or something like that?
Yeah, well, this one fella said, hey, why don't you cut just the top of my head so that I would be like a bald-headed guy.
All right. So you still got to be a barber then sometimes.
Oh yeah. Well, before war broke out, I was cutting some of the officers' hair, and this one officer says, Tony, would you be willing to just take care of the officers maybe a couple days out of the week and only cut the officers' hair? I said, yeah, I would, but then we had to do something, and he says, we can't have you do that, so I would have to do other work too. I would have to do KP and stuff. They wouldn't let me just cut hair all the time.
Okay. All right. Now, when you were going across the ocean, was your ship all by itself, or were you with a convoy? Do you remember?
I'm pretty sure it was a convoy because we didn't go straight, we zigzagged. And we didn't even, first I thought that we would probably land in, what's the islands there?
Hawaii?
Yeah, Hawaii. No, we didn't do that.
Yeah.
We went to, Adelaide.
Right. Okay. Now, do you remember anything about Adelaide, about getting to Australia? What was it like there?
People were friendly, and somebody said that what seemed odd to us when the trains were going into town there, the soldiers didn't want beer. What they wanted was some cold, fresh milk. Never mind the beer, they just wanted a good cold glass of milk.
Okay. Now, do you remember anything about else about Adelaide, about the camp or the people or what you did there? And did the band get to play for the Australians, or?
Oh yeah, we would, there were times when say well, that the soldiers were probably coming back from the front, you would look at them and they could hardly pick up their feet. But when the band played, it seemed to pick them up.
All right. Now, you train in Adelaide for a while, but then they move you someplace else in Australia, right? They put you on trains and send you someplace else?
Yeah. What I was surprised when you went from one, it wasn't called a state, but the
Well, province or whatever they call it.
province were different. You'd have to get off of that train, go on to another train, because that one train could not go into the other, like say, state or province.
Right, because the tracks were different sizes,
Yeah.
or yeah, okay. And then let's see, you went to Brisbane. Was that the next place? Camp Cable.
I think it was Cable. Where they named the camp because he was the first soldier that died on the ship. So what they done, they just had like a platform there, put him down there, and he went down to the bottom of the ocean.
Right,
Because they didn't keep him there.
right. So they had to bury him at sea.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Now, do you remember what you did when you were at Camp Cable? Was there more training, or did you just play in the band, or cut hair, or what did you do?
We just played in the band. Of course, the regular soldiers, why, they had more training.
All right. And then, when you finished training at Camp Cable, where did you go? Where is your division sent to?
We went to Melbourne to Sydney, and just up the coast. Then we went into New Guinea
Okay. And how did you get to New Guinea? Were you on a boat?
on a boat. Yes.
And where did you land in New Guinea? Where were you stationed?
I think we landed at Port Moresby.
And when you got there, what was your job, or what duties did you have? Because now the division was going into combat pretty soon.
Yeah.
And so what were you doing?
Well, we would, when we were in Australia, we'd go into town, play a concert, and we'd play for the troops too. It seemed like when I would see the guys coming in, they could barely pick up their feet. But when the band played, it seemed like it picked them up.
Okay. Now, did you do that in New Guinea too?
Yes.
Okay. And aside from playing in the band, what other job did you have in New Guinea? Could you do anything else that would help the soldiers?
Not that I
Well,
remember.
what were you
Yeah.
doing when they were walking over the mountains? What were you doing?
We used to go up in a plane and kick out supplies and rations to them.
Okay. And how could you tell where they were?
Well, I would guess that the pilots knew, and they would say to them, "Of fly there," and it wasn't like a forest. There was like just grass and stuff. You would kick the stuff out then.
Okay. Now, could that be dangerous?
Yes, because one of the officers, he was in a plane and he kicked the stuff out and he got caught in the back of the plane and it couldn't pull up, so he got killed.
All right. And was there anything you could do that would protect you, or would you work with other guys so that wouldn't happen?
Oh yeah. You know, they did ask us, did you want to go up in the plane? I figured, hey, if that guy could walk over there, hey, at least I'm helping some of my
Right.
friends out.
Tell them how you used to push it out of the, how did you push it out of the plane, Dad, the supplies?
Yeah,
What would one guy do and the other guy do?
we would sit down and we would kick it out, and somebody else would be up on top and they could push it down so it wouldn't get caught in the back of the plane.
All right. Now, after those men made it over the mountains, did you ever fly to any of the airstrips closer to Buna? Because they flew a lot of supplies and men
Yeah.
back and forth.
Yeah, when they got space there where the planes could land, we would help to put the casualties on the plane, come back to Moresby there and take them off the plane, and so that the medics could take them and put them in the hospital.
Tell them about how long it took. Remember the 45 days and the 45 minutes?
Yeah, it took the guys 45 days to walk over there. And when we were in a plane, they used to ask us, how long will it take us? We would say, oh, maybe about 45 minutes.
Right. Now, you said you're loading the casualties on the planes. Were a lot of the men just sick with tropical diseases, with malaria, or were most of them combat casualties?
Now, I don't know which one was the worst, because, yeah, it was both of them. They had malaria, and some of them were injured.
Tell him about when you guys were back in Port Moresby, how you'd unload the ships that came in for supplies.
So you worked with the airplanes. Did you also help unload ships?
Yes.
Okay.
You see, when the ships would be there, and I don't care if there was just one more, like say, not another bag, but like with ammunition on there. Even if there was somewhere on there, you better get the thing off the ship, because they were pulling out, because they didn't want the Japanese to zero in where you were at.
Right. Okay. Now, while you were based in Port Moresby, did the Japanese attack you? Did they send airplanes to bomb?
Oh yeah.
And did that happen all the time, or just occasionally, or?
Just occasionally.
And did you ever have any close calls? Did you ever have any bombs go off close to you, or anything like that?
Just trying to think. Like say, if we had to go to the bathroom to urinate, that wasn't bad. But if you had to go BM, did you dare to get up and go where the latrine was, or what? So
Okay.
you would get out of there, but hey, you didn't know which way or from where. If it was the Japanese that were firing, or if it was some of your own men. You know, when the bullets are flying, like we used to say, I wasn't worried about the one that had my name on there. The one I was worried about was the one that said, to who it may be concerned.
All right. Now, you mentioned, were there times when your own planes were shooting at you, or your own men were?
Oh, because one time, it was during the nighttime, an officer was coming through. He says, "Hey, the tanks are pulling back, and we want you to let them go back." And I thought to myself, "Well, you stupid jerk, if the tank can't hold them, you know what?" I said it to myself. I just said to him, I says, "I'm gonna be before the tanks pull back."
Okay. Now that probably was later on, right, in the Philippines or
Yeah.
something. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because on New Guinea, if you were in the Port Moresby area, the Japanese mostly were someplace else by then.
Yeah.
They were back at Buna. All right. Now, did you keep track of what was when you were on New Guinea and the division was fighting up toward Buna? Did you keep track of what was happening? Did you know what was going on, or did you just follow your orders?
Just followed the orders.
All right. Now, when you were loading the casualties and bringing them back, did you see men that you knew? Did you load any of your friends onto the planes?
Not that I remember of.
Okay. All right. Now, eventually the Buna campaign finishes, and then they withdraw the division. They take you guys back to Australia before you go anyplace else. So probably in the spring of '43, you go back to Australia for a while.
Yeah, we did go back to Australia.
Well, you had a girlfriend in Australia, didn't you?
Oh yeah. She was a nurse.
Mm-hmm.
And we were on one of the islands there, and we were there for a whole year because they used to say, MacArthur, "I shall return," and we always says, "Hey, you're not going to say I. What you should have said, we shall return."
Now, you said now you talked about being on an island for a year. Did you mean an island in Australia or an island in the Philippines?
In the Philippines.
Okay. That comes a little bit later. So you go to New Guinea, and then you come back from New Guinea, and you're back in Australia for a while. Now, what were you doing when you were back in Australia? Just playing in the band some more?
Yeah,
Okay. Now, had you gotten sick? Did you get malaria?
yes.
Okay.
Because one time, well, this is one, was back in the States here.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to know what they would do for me when I got malaria.
Mm-hmm.
So he said to me, "You probably had the flu." And I said to him, "Sir, you can take that and shove it up you know where. Don't tell me that. I am just imagining," because I did not know my wife, but when I was here, I would shake so bad that I would go home and I would have my folks cover me up because I was shaking so bad. And my wife used to see me, she said that she first thought that I was putting her on. But she says, "Hey, when you were shaking so bad, I knew that you was not putting on."
Right. Okay. Now, did you get sick with malaria while you were still in New Guinea or in Australia, or did that only happen to you later? So did you spend time in a hospital when you were still in the service?
No.
Okay.
Right now, I should have went, but don't ask me why I didn't go.
Okay.
Because you could say to the army, "Hey, I had malaria." How do you know? Did you go to the hospital? No. So all that is just hearsay.
Right. Yeah, because I know that early on, they didn't let guys go to the hospital very much. You had to have 105-degree fever or something like
Yeah.
that. And if you weren't quite that bad, you didn't go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got it, but you didn't get reported. All right. Now, eventually, they rebuild the division, they bring in new soldiers, and they train them. Now, another thing I guess I wanted to ask, while you were in Australia or in New Guinea, did you ever see any really important people? Did you ever see General MacArthur, for instance?
No, I did not get close to him. All I did is just heard about him.
But did he ever come and hear you guys play in the band? Were you playing at events where he was?
Yeah, we would, play concerts for the soldiers. Then when we were in Australia, we would play concerts in town for the people in
Right.
town there.
Okay. Now, another thing I know happened, at some point when you were in Australia, Eleanor Roosevelt came to visit the division. Did you remember that?
I heard of it, but
Okay.
I didn't see her.
All right. Now, when they finally get ready to send you back again, back into action, where did you go? Did you go back to northern New Guinea or someplace else?
Just trying to think, because I was on 3 islands in the Philippines: Mindoro, Luzon, and Leyte.
Right. Now, had you been any place else? Were you just in New Guinea and in the Philippines, or
Yes.
but did you go to Morotai or
No.
those places? Okay. So some of the division went those places,
Oh, yeah.
but the band didn't.
No, we didn't.
So
We didn't.
so your next stop maybe is really Leyte when you get to the Philippines?
Yeah.
Okay.
What happened right before you got to Leyte? What happened to your ship?
I was aboard ship, and a jet plane made a suicide dive, and he let a bomb out. So he hit the ship, and the bomb that he had. I was on the other side of the ship. When I got off, there was a hole big enough to drive a truck through, and I almost felt like saying, "Hey, give me a paddle, and I'm gonna help get this thing over to the island, so I could get off from the ship there."
Now, did you have to jump in the water to get out, or did the ship still get into port?
We got on to what they call a barge,
Okay.
and they took us over and onto the island.
All right. Now, when you were in the Philippines, you mentioned there was sort of at one time when they were talking about pulling the tanks back and that kind of thing. So, were you closer to the fighting sometimes?
Oh yeah. You know, you didn't know which way the bullets were flying from, because one of our guys, he got hit in the hind end, and he said, "Hey, I've been hit. Somebody come and get me." So the medics come over there, and they picked him up and took him to the hospital. But I don't know which way where the bullets were coming from.
How
Like
many- Go ahead.
we used to say, I wasn't worried about the one that had my name on it, but we were worried about what to whom may be concerned.
Right.
How many bullets did they give the people in the band? How many bullets did you have?
We had 15 bullets, and I figured I am not going to keep pulling the trigger on the gun. If I'm going to shoot, I'm going to make sure that I hit somebody. Say, hit Japanese. I'm not just going to keep pulling it in, and pretty soon, if I don't have any, what do I do then?
Right. Now, did you ever actually have to use your rifle, or you just had your bullets?
I just had the bullets, because one time we were in a building, and then they gave us some hand grenades, and somebody said that they were 8 seconds. When I looked at it, it didn't say 8 seconds, it said 4 seconds. If I see some Japanese down there, I'm not gonna wait for the 8 seconds, because if I'd wait that long, I would have probably got
Right.
hit.
Right. Now, what do you remember about being in the Philippines? And what was your life like most of the time there when the war was still going on?
What did the lady back here ask you about being hot and humid?
Oh yeah, when I come back here, I was saying to some of the, when they would say, what is it like there? I says, hot and humid. She says, was it as humid there as it is here? I says, ma'am, you don't know what humidity is, because we were close to the equator. And I said, hey, it was so hot there that you just lived through it.
Yeah. What could you do to cool off? If it got really hot, what would you do?
What could you do? Nothing. Maybe you went into the ocean, but hey, the ocean water, that wasn't very cool.
Right. Yep. All right. Now, in your collection of pictures, you have a lot of pictures of people from New Guinea and people from the Philippines. Now, when you were on New Guinea, did you see very much of the native people?
Yes. They used to say to us, don't cater to the natives, because if you cater to them, say that you would give them some of the hot dogs, somebody else would have better in the cans, and the natives knew which ones were good and which ones were not so good. So if you're gonna have them do something for you, they would say, no, Joe. They wanted the other ones.
Mm-hmm. So they didn't like the hot dogs and limas or whatever that was? Yeah, okay. Now, did you mostly deal with just the men, or did you see women and children too?
Mostly men.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't see the women and the children very much.
Right. And what kind of work did the men do? Did they help you move things and carry things, or what?
Sometimes they would, but they would say, if you want them to do something for you, give them something, but don't spoil them. Because if you give them a better thing, so they will say, no, no, Joe, they want the other ones that were better.
Okay. Now, when you went to the Philippines, and you're there in the Philippines even after the war is over, how much did you see of the people there?
Quite a few of them. We used to see the kids more than I would see the men. See, kids are women.
And did any of them work for you, or they just wanted to get food, or they were just going about their business?
They used to say to us, if you have them do something for you, give them something. Don't reward them, because
Well, was that the same in the Philippines as it was in New Guinea? Did they tell you the same thing in both places?
yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, when you were in the Philippines, what kind of places were you staying in? Were you sleeping in tents, or did you have buildings, or?
Had hammocks. They used to tell us, don't sleep on the ground. So sometimes when they would bring us to some place, it's midnight. Where are you going to go and find some place where that you could get up off? You're so dead tired. Sometimes I think that you would fall asleep before you hit the ground.
Well, why did they tell you not to sleep on the ground?
Of the different bugs and animals.
And do you remember any of the bugs or the animals being a real problem in New Guinea or in Philippines?
Not really.
How about when you guys would march from one place to the other? Wouldn't some of the guys be really tired?
Oh yeah, there were times when we would be marching, and I have seen guys fall asleep walking. You know, to me, it's almost hard to believe. And hey, when you see him walking, he's off the kind of trail a little bit. You grab him, and another thing too, if you're standing someplace, and if a soldier faints, it's just natural to help him up. And they said, just step aside, and the medics will take care of him.
All right.
So you figured, hey, here's a person that you know. Do you just let him fall on the ground and you don't help him up? Hey, orders are orders. You don't bend down and get him up.
Okay. All right. Now, do you remember where you were when the war ended? Were you on Luzon, or by then, or in Mindoro, or?
I was home then.
Okay.
There was times when they would say, well, you could go home for about a week, and then you would have to go back. And I said to myself, if I ever get back to the United States, I don't know if I can go back again.
Okay. So when did you leave the Philippines then? Was that maybe May or June of 45, or when that was?
I think it was in May.
Okay. And how did you get to go home? How did that work?
You would get points, and they would say, hey, there's so many soldiers that we will let go home, and I figured, well, I would like to go home and be home for Christmas and New Year's.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get to go home over Christmas and New Year's.
Well, that's when you were in Louisiana, but when you were going, how did you get your points so you could get out of the service and go home for good in May?
So you got to go home because you had enough points
Yeah.
that you were done. Okay. Because you had been drafted in that first group
Yeah.
of draftees
Yeah.
way back in 41.
Yes.
And you'd been overseas a long time.
Yeah.
Okay. So you actually get to go home. Now, were there other men from your unit who were leaving before you did?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Because the ones who'd been in combat or been wounded maybe, or even other guys in the band?
Well, the other guys, I don't know, they would just let just so many guys, so you would, maybe you would draw names. And I figured, hey, I'd like to be home for Christmas. There was only so many guys could go home, so I didn't get to go home during the holidays.
But eventually, even before the war ended, though, you did get to go home.
Oh, yeah.
So you get home then, was it July of 45 then? Kind of end of July? Or early August, maybe, when you get home?
I think it was July.
Okay. Because I think your discharge paper says July 31st, but they discharge you from someplace,
Yeah.
and you still got to get home. All right. Now, when you got home, what did you do after that? Did you just go back to work or do nothing for a while?
Not very long. I was a barber,
Mhm.
and my dad was running the barber shop, so I went back to work so I could make some money.
Right. Okay. And then, did you stay in that line of work?
Yes.
You were a barber? Okay. Now, when you were traveling around the Pacific, when you were in Australia and in New Guinea and in the Philippines, were you still cutting guys' hair?
Oh yeah.
You still had a barber shop?
You know, I had to do, like I said, KP work and everything. They wouldn't let me. As a matter of fact, this is before war broke out. One of the officers said, "Hey,
Right. You told me that story.
if I can get a little, tent for you, would you be willing to just to cut the officer's hair?" I
Right.
says, "Yeah, well that sounds good," but that never happened.
But then later on, though, I mean, you would cut people's hair if you were in New Guinea or in the Philippines?
In my what you call spare time.
Right. Now, was it difficult sometimes to just get the right setup to do that kind of thing? Clean water or soap, or were there times when you just grow a beard and grow a lot of hair?
Yeah.
Tell him what happened. How did you ever end up in the Hoosgow, in the jail? What happened that time?
When we went back to Australia, I wanted to get my barber tools, sharpened up. So I said to the top kick, "Can I have a pass?" "No, you don't need one." So I'm in town. Now I don't know what I did, if I looked wrong or something. MP says, "Hey, soldier. Hey, soldier." I turn on, "Yeah, you, come here." He says, "Can I see your pass?" I says, "I don't have to have no pass. We just come back from the front. Come with me." So they put me in the guardhouse. 3 different days, 3 different guardhouses. And even when I was in the guardhouse, I told the officer that was in charge of the guardhouse, "Would you be willing to stay here and cut the soldiers' hair?" I said, "Forget it. Don't ask me to say I want to get back to my own outfit.
Right.
What happened when you finally got back? What did the guys say to you?
They thought that I went AWOL
Mm-hmm.
or I was in a hospital. They looked in the hospital, looked in the guardhouse. They couldn't find me. So when I finally did get back, they said, "Where the hell were you?" I said, "Hey, the MP put me in the guardhouse," and I would say to them, "Hey, call up my outfit. You'll be moving the next day." I moved, but into another guardhouse.
Mm-hmm.
So 3 different days, I was in 3 different outfits, and they finally took me back to my company, and they said, "Where the hell were you?
Right.
We were looking for you."
All right. Now, when you think back about that time when you were in the Army, let's see, I guess, are there other stories that stand out in your mind that we haven't gotten here yet?
I don't, I mean, like I said, even some of them now, I'm just sort of like, oh yeah, tell them that story, tell them that story. I don't necessarily think so.
Okay. Well, how do you think your time in the Army wound up affecting you? Did you learn from it, or did that experience change you at all? Or were you just pretty much the same guy the whole time?
I think I was the same way.
Mm-hmm.
No, because I didn't want to join the guards because I figured, hey, I don't want to be with you. But then when I got drafted, I was sent down to where they were.
Mm-hmm.
When you go into New Orleans, you told me some stories about how when you guys were there, you'd go wanting to go into some of the bars or whatever that had cover charges.
Yeah.
How would you get around that?
We would go into a club, and they would have a cover charge. No, I don't want to go in. I'm looking for one of my buddies so we could stay back there, watch the floor show, and go on to another place.
Now, when they would go into a place like New Orleans, were there men who would get themselves into trouble? Would they get drunk or get in fights or things like that? Or not the guys that you knew?
Oh, some of them would get drunk. When you're in uniform, you don't want to pay the cover charge.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm looking for one of my buddies.
Right.
So they're just in the back of the place so you can watch the floor show and then too, if you were in the front place, drinks were more then. You go back 2 or 3 bars and it was cheaper there.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, you've taken us kind of through your trip and overseas and back here again. So I think we've pretty well covered your story here and pretty well filled up my tape. So thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
I'm glad that I could think of some of the things I don't think of,
Some things I have not heard from anybody else.
Oh.
All right.